fear of.
Is it okay if I record us?
Sorry.
And if you don't like it in the end, I won't use it anywhere. But I do like to post it in our Facebook group. If you're okay with that. If not, I'll shut it off. We don't have to record it, but a lot of times things are said that could help other people that couldn't make it tonight, you know? So if it's okay with everybody, I'll leave the recording on. And then at the end, you could tell me, get rid of it. I don't want it. Okay? Does that sound okay with everybody? Okay.
That's fine.
So say that again, Liliana.
Oh, I was saying, going back to what you said, we feel what we feel what we think. I was saying, like, if we're going through something bad, of course we're going to think like bad things, or like we're this or we're that. But if we're going through like something great, our mind, our way of thinking, it's going to change. And also I think that fear interferes in our way of thinking. And that's why I feel like mind is so powerful. That can go both ways, either the good side or the bad side.
Right. And that's kind of like how it is all day long. It's like, you know, waves, bit of a roller coaster, but the roller coaster evens out a lot more as you recognize that the value is not in all the little stuff that we think, all the personal stuff that we think. You know, when Sid had a great way of differentiating between personal mind, which, like Jesse was talking about, which tends to get us scattered and all over the place if we're following all our personal thinking. And personal is ego, you know. So if we're following our personal thinking, our ego, we're like kind of all over the place. But when we're calm, you know, there's like this place of no thought. I don't know that I've ever experienced completely no thought. I don't know that anybody can experience no thought, but I know that I have experienced thoughts that I'm not paying attention to. Especially if you're ever sitting by the ocean and you're on vacation, thoughts are coming. And it's like, hey, I'm on vacation. I can't be bothered. Don't bother me, you silly thoughts. And you don't pay attention to it. They come and they go. And that's really the sweet spot of where we can live life from, a place where it's so much easier and calmer and we don't have to upset ourselves with stuff. Now, does upsetting stuff happen? Yeah. You know, was the World Trade Center bombed? You know, our kids starving in places? Horrible things are happening. And we're not putting our head in the sand. We read newspapers, we hear bad stuff, but thinking about it and talking about how awful it is to people is not solving that. It's not solving starvation. It's not going to put buildings back up after they've been bombed. So you want to be in a place of calm where something might occur to you about how you can help the starvation in the world. You know, who knows? But that's where our creative juices flow when we're not bogged down with what's wrong. What's wrong with us? What's wrong with life? What's wrong with... Because all that is judgment. Judgment just really puts the kibosh on loving feelings, compassionate feelings, understanding feelings. Does that all make sense? Or is there a part that doesn't make sense?
Makes sense.
That makes sense.
And the thing is that, you know what I'm thinking about as you're speaking is, I keep myself so busy that I never allow myself that calming to kind of really think. So like just up until this point, I was doing 3 or 4 things. And then I had to look at the clock and say, all right, I have to get on. Because that's me.
Well, that's so different from, I think, most of us, you know, and I certainly get caught up in that too. And it feels like a high sometimes. Like I get a bit of a rush when I'm doing 3 things at once.
But I
However,
think a lot of it is though, is to keep my mind off the negative thoughts coming in.
now that sounds like an insight to me. To
Yeah.
realize, man, I think I keep myself so busy so that I don't have to pay attention to the negative thoughts that come in. However, if you treat those negative thoughts like just images, that's all they are. They're just thoughts. They have no substance. They're not a phone. It's a substance. You can pick it up, you can hold it. It's not a book. They're invisible. They have no substance. We're the ones that imbue our thoughts with substance, like making it into something. It's a thought, comes, it goes. There's a lot of thoughts we have, a lot of negative thoughts we have that we don't pay attention to. And there's positive thoughts we have that we don't pay attention to. But you're right that, all that thinking will cover up just this natural state of being in wisdom. It's interesting. I think, Jen, you had the question.
Well, now I kind of have another question, actually.
Yeah, shoot, because I was just
Well-
going to read those 2 pages because they went so well with your question. But
Okay, but
with
okay,
the next
that's
one.
fine then. Okay, that's fine. You want to read those
You
pages?
want me to read those 2? And
Yeah.
then we'll come back to your question. Questions are great.
And I'll try to remember
Great.
my question. Sometimes I forget my question.
You don't have it written down? You want to say it now? You could say it now.
Say it now so you remember later. So when you're talking about this kind of thing and that the thoughts are, just things that are kind of fleeting, I feel like part of that is like with relationships, any kind of relationship, you fall into these kind of familiar patterns. And sometimes it's like, you don't have to fall into these familiar patterns, right? Because you sometimes want to build, maybe you're just not, I don't know, maybe you just get into these familiar patterns to not have a silence. And then kind of like what Jesse's doing, where she wants to fill up her time, maybe you want to fill up the space with things that you've said before in your communication, just to have things flow.
Yeah. Have any of you spent any time, even like 5 minutes, just in silence with someone you're close to sitting next to you, and you're admiring a scene, or you're in a really nice place and you don't really have to say anything, but there's just good feelings, good vibes? Yeah.
Yeah.
All of us have had that experience. Yeah. And sometimes, you will have the thought where, oh, this feels awkward. There's silence. This is awkward. And we'll look at how we can fill up our time, or how we can fill up that space because it's awkward. We'll say something that really doesn't really fit the moment, or it's something we said before, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, we're human. We do stuff like that, but it's great to talk about it as a group like us and say, well, wait a minute, maybe that's not as necessary as I thought to fill up space. So we all learn from each other.
Lori, so
I-
what I find it like very difficult, it's like how to not make those negative thoughts like into a materialized thing.
Right.
Because that's when I feel like I know they're just my thoughts, and they're just in my mind, but just to me, they're like, they could be this tiny, but in my mind, they're just like huge.
Huge. Well, you know why? That's complements of consciousness. Consciousness is what does that. Where we have a thought and it looks real. Anything we think that we're not asking to think this thing, it just comes to mind, whatever it is, and that's reality. It's not real, but it's our reality. If it was real, everybody would have the same experience. We'd all be walking around with the same thoughts on our mind. But we don't. We all have separate individual thoughts that come to us. Pretty fascinating.
I think what I'm sorry, what is the woman, what is your name? The woman who just spoke, I'm so sorry.
Oh, Liliana.
What Liliana just said was really interesting, because what she was saying about how like it's like maybe just a certain thought you're having, and how it could be like, it could feel like it's like just something that's taking over your entire day, or just like your entire, just how you're feeling in the moment, and how like it might just be like the most like trivial thing, but it really just feels like it kind of just, I don't know, it just feels like it feels really real, and it feels like it's kind of just like this really real problem that's occurring, and you can't really focus on anything else until you solve the problem, which is really just whatever you're thinking about.
And have you ever had this experience where something comes to your mind which solves a problem you weren't even thinking about?
Mm-hmm.
That's wild, right? Talk about mystery. How does that happen? How does that happen? You know, like one of my favorite examples of that is running into somebody. Say you run into somebody, you know them, but you can't remember their name. You're at the grocery store and they remember your name and they say, "Hi, Lori." And you're like, going through the Rolodex of your mind, trying to find their name in there. And you give up eventually, and you just, get through it as gracefully as you can. You're 3 aisles down looking at the ingredients in a can of soup, and the name comes to you. And you weren't even looking for it. You weren't trying to find the name. It just, boom, there it is. To me, that shows us that there is this deeper wisdom, like mind is incredible, that it can solve these things. We don't have to go into the intellect, because the intellect is limited. It only has the information that's been programmed into it. But mind is so expansive that it just gives us so many more possibilities that we may not have even thought of on our own. There's this cool story, if any of you are reading The Secret of Love, the story came to me of Dickon and Coisy, where they had this really big family decision to make, which would entail the dad moving to the other coast. They're on the East Coast. He wanted to move to the opposite coast to take a job. And their son was a senior in high school, and they didn't want to relocate him as a senior in high school. Like, what are we going to do? So they'd have these family meetings. They'd get together, and somebody would break down and get really upset. And they would table it. And they'd say, okay, we're going to come back when we're all in a better state and toss it around some more and see what we come up with. Well, finally, they came back enough times, and they were all in such a quiet state of mind. Somebody comes up with, it's going to sound obvious, but it wasn't obvious to them. And there was a second part that blew their mind. So the thing that comes to them was, okay, how about if dad moves to the West Coast, and the final year, mom and the daughter will stay with Ben, I think that was his name, until he graduates, and then we'll all move out to Washington. That was where they wanted to go, the state of Washington. And let's make it the best year ever. That's what came out of, like, where did that come from? And let's make it the best year ever. How are we going to do that? Isn't that cool? That came from a deeper, quieter state of mind. See, we, as a society, we have gotten so accustomed to using our brain and our brain only as the sole provider for information for us. And there's a much quieter, deeper place, because it's the brain that gives us the negative judgment, the analysis, the criticism, analysis of ourselves, that we're not good enough.
I think
That's brain
continuing
stuff.
on that.
What's that, Spencer?
And also, like, it's just when you're like making a decision or you're having to do something, you have to, it's usually just in real time like that. Like, you know, so you don't generally have time to think it over and maybe use more than just like short-term critical thinking. So maybe I think that's where people go astray. So then you may make a wrong decision or a wrong choice, and then you might have that time to yourself, whether it be just like you're in bed or you're home and you're thinking about it, and it's kind of one of those lost moments.
That's right. Whenever you feel up against the gun, is that the saying, where you feel like you've got to move and do this thing now, or say this thing now?
Fight or flight, isn't that what they call that?
What, Spencer?
Isn't that what they call that? Like a fight or flight?
Fight or flight, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Some people close down, but other people just fly with whatever comes to them, like they're fighting. And you use that feeling of feeling pressured as a reminder. Wait a minute, this time, it's very, very rare that we have to make a split-second decision. I'll tell you what, when we do have to make a split-second decision, it's because of some dangerous situation, and wisdom kicks in. Wisdom kicks in. I mean, haven't you been in this situation where you're about to plow into a car and all of a sudden, like, you realize it? Where did that realization come from? And there's a bunch of other examples like that, of people who are in accidents and somehow they know at some level. Like you read these stories every so often, and somebody will say, boy, you were such a hero. And the person says, hero? I had no critical thinking involved whatsoever. I just responded. And that happened at a much deeper level. It was not brain activity trying to figure it out. It was,
so it's based
like,
on
automatic.
what you learned from the past.
Say again, Liliana?
I said it's based, so you're thinking like that 1 second thinking is based on whatever experiences you've had from the past.
Right. And most things really, you want to treat things as brand new, something brand new, and not use whatever happened in the past to direct you. That's where people get into trouble.
So, what you said was interesting, that we don't, going back to what you said about how we don't really have to make these snap decisions, right? Sometimes that we can allow ourselves space to get into that space where we can make a calm decision, right?
Yeah.
Or wherever that space,
yeah,
where we can make a rational, or whatever, however you want to term it.
right.
So I don't know why we feel that though. Like, can you talk about that? Like, why do we feel like always, do we feel, I don't know, like, why is that? And why do we just do that? I guess I don't know why I do that.
Yeah, one of the mysteries of life. I don't know, do any of you know the answer? Why do we do that? Why do we get this idea that we have to answer quickly? I think a lot of it comes from our schooling, right? Like the teachers expect quick answers, and no fault of theirs. That's how they're trained to believe that, we're supposed to know the answer right away.
Maybe it's like a weight being lifted off of someone's, like maybe like a weight coming off your shoulders kind of thing. Like maybe if it's like something that you're struggling with thinking about, maybe it kind of just feels better to not to relieve yourself of whatever like choice you have to make. And so you want to make a quick choice to get
to get it off your shoulders.
Yeah, I think so. That's like my guess from maybe some sort of personal experience, I guess.
Yeah.
That's like how
it's a good guess. Yeah, I like that guess. That's a good one. Sure, I bet that enters into it too.
I say,
But,
and why it's also like that fear of asking for extra time to think it over and actually like wanting to say what you really wanted to say.
Well, here's a good one that I love this. Being in a state of not knowing is a great place to be. It's a good place to be, believe it or not. Not knowing. When I was first learning this, I was in a small group of people in Boston, and we would get together like this, but you know, it was before internet. So we would get together and I'd have to drive to Boston in one of the people's offices. And one of the people in our circle was a psychiatrist, an MD psychiatrist. I can still remember, it was so amazing. Like, he jumped up, he said, I just had the most amazing insight. He said, I just realized I don't have to know everything. It totally shocked him. Like, he did not even realize that he pressured himself, that he's supposed to know everything, you know, in his field. I'm sure he was referring to that. No one person thinks that they're going to know everything. But in his field, it was such a relief for him to realize that he didn't, not only did he not have to know anything, but it added so much pressure in his life to have that belief. So not knowing is a place of quiet and reflection, being in quiet reflection and sometimes it means, I learned this from Dr. Pransky, who was a student of Sid's also. He said, and George Pransky is a psychologist, and he said, oh, what was it exactly about not knowing? He said there's a way, it's like engineering your mind for answers. So you ask yourself the question, put on the back burner, like sauce bubbling on the back burner of the stove, let it bubble until it's ready. And then forget your question, take your mind off the question, go do something else. And then you're in the shower later, you're driving down the street, whatever, and something occurs to you like, oh man, wow, I like that, you know? See, we can depend upon that deeper wisdom and common sense. And one of my favorite examples, I may have already told you guys, and maybe even more than once, because it's a gruesome story, but I really like it as being so illustrative of this, which is the boy who shot his principal. They tell you all about this, and Dr. Pettit had to go to jail and interview him, the psychiatrist, Dr. Pettit, because there's also a Connecticut with the same name, but they're two different people. So Dr. Bill, he goes by. So Dr. Bill goes in and interviews the kid, and the kid says to him, man, as I was walking down the hallway with the pistol in my hand, there was a quiet voice that said, you don't have to do this. He said, if only I knew to listen to that voice, I would not be here. And that is 100% true. That we just have not been taught that there's a quiet voice of reason. And another metaphor I love is the cartoons with the devil and the angel. You know, when the devil is telling you, go, shoot him up, go. And the angel is the quiet one whispering in your ear, you don't have to do this. Save yourself. So, you know, we can get really so much better at paying attention to the quiet voice of wisdom. And when you see it in action, when you see it happening in your life, that's what gives you the results that you're looking for. And that's what encourages you to do more of that. Make sense? Why don't I read these two pages? Because I know she talks about wisdom energy. If I can find it. I have it a few places. Wisdom energy versus ego energy. Here it is. Just need a sip here. Acknowledging our human frailties can be a real gift for the relief it brings when we bypass ego and admit, yes, I'm not supermom or superwoman or superman. The relief we experience when we acknowledge that we have physical needs we want to take care of, and the relief when we honor those needs. I've learned a lot about humility in the last while in regard to the physical form, things that I've not learned before. I've been a student of this understanding for close to 45 years, and there's still so much more. It never ends. She's referring to her continuation of learning the deeper understanding of how we operate. I've learned, there's so much more to learn just in terms of the simple act of living. Perhaps living with a little more grace and appreciation, with a little less ego each step of the way. I'll share a story with you. This happened before my family took me to task for not taking better care of myself. I have a walking cane that was given to me a few years ago. It's the prettiest collapsible cane decorated with images of butterflies and flowers. My friend gave it to me as she observed that I had some difficulty walking. I was about to travel to London, as I often did, to speak at a conference. I wasn't sure if I could walk up the stairs to the stage, and my friend said, well, ask someone to help you. I recoiled as she said that and hastened to say, oh, I couldn't do that. I'd be embarrassed. And she said to me, Elsie, you know what they say, pride goeth before a fall. Well, I don't know if you've ever heard that old saying, but I'm here to tell you she was right on target. She caught me in my ego and chastised me with love. I heard her. And so I did ask a kind man to help me up on the stage. My ego had slipped away, and it felt good to make it easier on myself. The next time I went to London on June 2019, I took my cane with me, and I was so grateful to have the help. People were so kind when they saw me walking down the long hallway in the airport and asked if they could assist me. Going into the lounge again, someone came to support me. People were so thoughtful and helpful. I thought to myself, this is pretty cool. I was so touched at the kindness I experienced. It was totally unexpected. I just discovered there are gifts when we move past ego and find a little bit more humility. Unexpected gifts, not only in terms of people being kind to me, but the gift of the release of stress from ego and from pride. I never knew you could benefit so greatly from humility. There's a difference between a sense of pride and rising to the occasion, coming from our innate mental health versus the pride that comes from ego. For example, thinking when our body is crying out for rest, I'm strong, I can do this, I can surpass my tiredness. There's a real difference. The difference is in the feeling. When we take a moment or two to be still, we can tell the difference between the energy from ego or the energy from wisdom. Energy from wisdom feels softer, yet is still a very powerful feeling. Another example comes to mind of wisdom energy versus ego energy. I was sharing what I was learning about this topic with another client, Miles, during our monthly call. He was very quiet after I'd shared what was new to me. How is this sitting with you, Miles? You seem very thoughtful. Miles said, yes, I'm in quite a reflective space right now. I think the question that you raised about the discernment of ego energy and wisdom energy is really stirring me. I'm overly familiar with ego energy, but I'm becoming more aware of that quality of energy on me and others, and more aware of my response to that feeling. I'm finding it quite uncomfortable a lot of the time, so I'm physically noticing that I'm way out of sync when that happens. How can I return to peace and stillness to allow wisdom to guide me? Miles asked. I'd love to have more faith and be more grounded in my work. I've just come from giving 3 days of coaching and leadership sessions, and I was in ego a lot. I'm thinking about it now and wondering how could I have been more in my quiet space and more trusting of wisdom. Elsie said, you know, what I love about what you've just shared, Miles, first of all, your honesty and your vulnerability that you would share what you just did. Thank you. Secondly, the fact that you're noticing your response to ego energy is very significant. I suspect you judge yourself for noticing rather than celebrating that you're noticing. Do you know what I mean? Miles shook his head, so I continued. Instead of judging yourself with thoughts like I could have done better or I was in my ego, honor the fact that you noticed. Noticing is the gift of consciousness. When you see without judging yourself and without blame, you've got freedom. I guarantee the next time you do another program or another session, you won't be the same person. I guarantee that, Miles. It's just that switch from judging yourself for noticing ego to honoring the fact that consciousness has shown you this. And you say, thank you. You feel that, don't you? I can tell by the look on your face that you feel the truth of that. And Miles says, hell yes. Cool, huh? You see,
Miles
I
said,
mean,
hell yes.
what's that?
So Miles said, hell yes.
Miles said, hell yes. Yeah, that's written here. I didn't make it up. Hell yeah. Hell yes. Yeah. So, you know, we're all on this journey trying to see how we can have an easier, more fulfilling time of it without wrapping our head around things that don't serve us. So many things. We all, you know, are guilty of that. Not figuratively guilty, but like Elsie said, how humbling. It's so humbling to realize that we're all the same. We all do the same things to ourselves.
It's so hard to mostly use the wisdom energy instead of the ego energy. I guess it's just, I don't know, just the way life is. You're always like just using that ego energy, not knowing that the wisdom energy has so much to offer.
Yeah, right. But in a way, you know, if you really reflect on it, isn't it easier to use wisdom energy?
It is. I was just thinking about the part that they were saying, like the lady with the cane, and she didn't want to ask for help. And so what it makes me think about like that's the way we were raised. Like at least I was. Like you just do it and you figure it out. And now I'm on my own. And my husband will say that. He'll say, nope, we're good. We'll figure it out. Like he will not, we never ask for help. So I think sometimes it's just somebody else speaking in your ear saying, no, we don't do that. And then it's just embedded. And so it's difficult to get out of that pattern to ask for the help. And then the other thing is when I do say I need help, I don't always get heard. So I don't always do it anymore. So if I say, Lori, I need help, and you're like, you're fine, then I'm like, I'm not going to ask for help anymore. It makes me shut down.
So when the people you say that to, what are they hearing? They're not hearing what you're saying. They're hearing their interpretation of what you're saying. And sometimes, sometimes you might find a different way to say it that they'll realize. And sometimes you won't. You know, sometimes we just, no matter what we do, we're not going to get through to somebody. And sometimes you could really surprise yourself in a moment of, who knows, when you're both in a state of wisdom, you make impact somehow with that person. But you know what I think too, Jesse, and all of this for all of us, that I think the tendency is to wait until we're really aggravated to ask for help. And that tone comes through. Like, we're thinking in our head, what are you all stupid that you can't tell? Like I'm carrying 5 loads of laundry? Like you all stupid? You all see me? You're thinking this. And it comes out like, can I get some help? But if we realize, you know what, they're in their world, they're not even noticing that I'm like falling over the laundry here. They're so oblivious to it. Then it comes out a little differently. That's where the love and understanding come in.
I just wanted to say something about the lady with the cane story. I think the other part about that, when you're thinking about asking for help, is how it comes off when you're comfortable or not comfortable. Like probably she had to like lean into the idea of using that cane. So she didn't come across as, oh, I'm really upset that I have to use this cane now. Oh, so she probably she was accepting of it, and that probably came across to other people as, oh, look at this person. If she needs help, I can offer it. She's open to the idea of help.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking, oh, I need help. Oh, I hate this. I don't want to do this kind of thing. Right. She leaned into it.
Leaned into it. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Acceptance. Oh, wow. That's such a powerful word. Acceptance, but also, I guess there's a positive and a negative to acceptance, because I could, accept that I lost hearing and file for unemployment benefits, or, and Jen, you can relate to this, you're a speech therapist, right? Or accept it and say, okay, I'm going to educate myself and find out what I can do about it. Right. So there's different ways, it's accepting it with ego. Well, look at what happened to me. Right. I'm just going to collect unemployment insurance and screw it. Miserable. Yeah. Right. Or you accept it as just part of life. And then when you accept it with humility, things open up. Yeah,
because I know that I have a tone when I'm not happy about asking for things or help. It just naturally happens. So I have to address that before I ask for help.
Yeah,
because I hate it. I hate asking.
Or like you said, first accepting what's going on with your life first before asking for help, which is really hard when everything is going great and then something happens and then you first have to accept it, acknowledge it, that it's actually happening to you, and then asking for help.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Sounded like that's what happened with Elsie, right? She came to accept that. Yeah, she's just not sturdy on her feet anymore.
So maybe it's almost like a bargain with yourself, because you'll like say, okay, I'm just going to try this cane thing for a little while. Maybe you just have to make like a bargain and say, okay, I'll just try it, and then lean in and then see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, I wrote a little book, it's more like a booklet for middle school age kids called It's an Inside Out World. And that was the whole premise of the story, that using your life as a learning lab where you try things out, you experiment, let's try to find a state of gratitude and then go out in the world and see if I'm treated differently, stuff like that. Yeah. Use life as a learning lab. Not like, I don't want you to hear it like, fake it till you make it, or a technique. I don't want you to hear it as a technique, but that came to you, Jen, that just came to you. To me, that's coming from an insight or coming from wisdom. Like, why not check it out? See if I ask for help from a more loving place rather than a place of expectation and anger that you're not figuring it out. You're not figuring it out. Like, I need help. Like, what's wrong with you? Yeah, like I've been there. I know what that's like.
Right.
That's how I know, to give that example, because I know I've been there. Like,
Well, that's
yeah,
kind of like separating, I guess that's kind of separating like what you're projecting on what you think is going to happen and the reality, kind of, right? So you see, okay, you've been through this road before, you're going to accept trying it. Maybe what happened in the past is not going to happen this time. So you're just going to try it and see what happens from a different
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, but that's such a great example of how our thinking gets in our way. If we have an expectation of people helping us or people knowing how to help us without us giving them more specific directions, if we have that on our mind, we're going to get aggravated when reality doesn't match what we have in our mind. It's going to be aggravating, right? And that, like you said, the tone comes through. And if somebody is being asked for help, like, can't you help me? What, you think they're going to want to help you? I don't think so. They're going to say.
And the people that you live with can read your noise and your sound so well.
They can read your annoyance. Yes, yes. Before you know it. Before even you know that you're annoyed, other people will know you're annoyed. Isn't that true? I love that. It's so funny how humans are. So funny. Yeah, we're often the last to know. I'm not annoyed. You're crazy. Yeah. Oh, but if you can laugh at yourself and see, man, this is how humans operate. I'm a human. It's humbling. It is humbling, let me tell you. I had a client, a young person, I think she was somewhere in her 30s. So she knew about slips. I don't think young women wear slips anymore, but we did when we were growing up. So she says that when she catches herself being stupid, she says, oh my God, my human is showing. Like my slip is showing, my human is showing. I thought that was so cute.
So true.
Yeah. It's a good one, huh? Wow. So what else comes to mind? Boy, it's already 7 minutes to 9. These hours go so fast. They really, at least for me. I don't know about the rest of you. Went pretty fast, huh? You know what's great? Are you all on the Facebook group, by the way? Because some people don't have Facebook. I know Jesse's there. I don't know, Liliana, are you there?
No, I don't.
You don't do Facebook? Yeah. Because sometimes I post these on YouTube, but
yeah, I do YouTube all the time.
Yeah, same.
But you're in our Facebook group, aren't you? Oh, you're not, Jen. You don't use Facebook.
I do everything on your. I look up everything that you say on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
I do the YouTube. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the sidbanks.com, that's not Facebook. That's a website, sidbanks.com. Should I show all of you how that works? One of the greatest things about Zoom is I can share my screen and show you I have to be in the right
So
place.
with the website.
Share screen. And I could show you what goes on the Sid Bank site. Makes it easier to navigate them. So you see when you go to home, the home of sidbanks.com, you see these three. Oh, I'm already in the video. I want to get to the home screen. So it's just going to refresh in a minute, I think. Yeah. Why is it not opening?
Window. I must have too many windows.
There we go. Takes a little bit. So you get to the home screen and you scroll down a little bit and
Sorry.
oh, you go to video. Oh, there they are. There they are. Okay, it takes a while to load. So you go to watch right here.
Oh, cool.
The one on the left with the two palm trees. You go to watch, click on that a couple of times, and then it opens up 3 more bubbles. And those are 3 different lectures: Hawaii, Long Beach lecture, and the one furthest on the right is Washington lectures. It's got the monument, the Washington Monument. And I always tell people to start with those because it talks about the 3 principles, and then it leads into separate realities. The 3 principles explain how we're all living in a different reality. And each one of these parts is like 10 minutes long. And then it moves to the next one, part 2. And then it moves to separate realities, part 1. I don't even know if there's a part 2. All of this is going to take all of a half an hour. And a lot of people listen before bedtime, because then they get really quiet and they fall asleep. And sometimes they fall asleep while they're still listening. So then you just do it tomorrow. And then you come back to the homepage when you've done that half hour. And then the next day, go back to video. Oh, that's to shop them. No, I think you have to get it from the home. Or just go back one. Backtrack one. It's just working slow, I guess. I have too many tabs open. There we go. And then you click on Hawaii or Long Beach. You know, there's some really interesting topics in here. We'll look at Hawaii. And then in the book section, I tell people, you know, it's kind of cool to start with Sid's the first book Sid wrote, which is Second Chance. It's a nice story about a man who goes through bad things in life. He loses Secret to the Mind. Isn't that interesting? Secret to the Mind, part 2, The Oneness of Life, part 1. Interesting stuff. And simply said, Sid had such an amazing way of just stating what wasn't obvious to me at all when I first started listening to him, but it became really obvious over time, what he was saying. The first story in The Secret of Love is Chip and Jan, and Jan tells a story about the first time she listened to Sid. She's like, with a check mark, well, that's true, check. And he'd say another line, well, that's true, check. You know, in her mind, she just kept hearing truth. And then the Long Beach lectures, The Great Illusion, part 1, The Great Illusion, part 2, Truth Lies Within. Interesting. And then, yeah. Have any of you been listened to any of those? And heard anything that really stood out for you? Then I'll show you the books. Oh, looks like you can read online. I didn't even know they had this. Read online. Let's see what that's like. I mean, I have all of his books, so I just haven't seen this lately. You can read online? Oh, that's cool. Where? It's not telling us. Read. Oh, here you go. When you go back to the home, there's watch, listen, read. So I wonder what's in listening. Listen must just be like a podcast, I guess. There we go. The Enlightened Gardener is another cool book. This book, I mean, they're all really cool, but this book is about fantasy. It takes place at a psychology conference in London, and a group of psychologists are walking across the grounds to get into the conference, and they strike up a conversation with the gardener. The gardener is the Sid character, and the gardener, they learn more from the gardener than they do from the psychology conference, basically. And then there's actually the Enlightened Gardener Revisited. That is like, oh my God. I know Sid says, don't be reading with a highlighter. He would probably say, don't be reading with a highlighter. I don't know, because you're getting too intellectual. Maybe he would say that. I don't know, actually. But I have a highlighter thing. Dating back to college, I can see that Jen can relate. I don't know.
Well, I get it, because like people always tell me I'm too academic during therapy when I'm working with kids sometimes, but I get it, because like you're supposed to get the whole picture, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want to be too academic. I get the message.
Well, long story short, the Enlightened Gardener Revisited copy that I have has less white space than it has highlighted space. Yeah, I'm just like, this is incredible. But the missing, not the missing link, the missing link is fabulous. Second Chance was Sid's first book. And then The Quest of the Pearl is like part 2 of Second Chance. Because then Richard, who's the character, the main character, goes back to Hawaii a few years later. And he's this changed human being. He's a different person. And he himself doesn't realize it. You know, like we're the last to realize we've changed. Other people will say, gee, what are you doing that has you so calm? Oh, I guess it just, I don't know if it shows you anything other than the picture. I guess it's just the picture of it. Maybe you have to buy the book. I guess it's just the picture. I don't know. You guys will figure it out. They'll play around with it. Yeah. Do you like what you have heard so far?
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
I listened to some on YouTube. I liked it. Yeah.
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 And
It took me a little while
what's really cool about it is when you start seeing things, you have insights. Like you'll read something or listen to something of Sid's and something comes to mind, you know, that kind of wakes you up to something. That's when it's so fun to see, like, not really the error of our ways, because we're just doing the best we can, right? Everybody does the best they can, but to be able to see beyond that is just such an amazing gift that we're all born with that. We're all born with that innate health, that innate wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching I think what is part 1 of The Illusion. I forgot which the type, which series that is, but it's part 1 of The Illusion of, is it The Illusion of Thought? That's probably not what it's actually called, but I remember it was something along the lines of how we all live in our own separate realities, and how true that is, when normally I feel like that's kind of like a statement that's kind of like just like a general blanket statement that people say, but it's really, really true. Like, and I feel like personally for me, when somebody says, "Oh, when someone would say that somebody's living in their own world," it's usually kind of like a pretentious-y kind of thought, like just the idea of somebody living in their own world. But it kind of applies to everybody, because we all get wrapped up in our own personal battles that we have. So I guess it makes sense.
That's right, Spencer. Yeah, we really are all living in our own little world, our own little thought bubble. Right. And what a gift to listen to somebody else's world, their worldview, their thought bubble, without feeling offended, without taking offense, because even if they're saying something offensive about you, it's unbelievable to be able to hear them and not feel offended and know that, man, they're probably in a bad place right now. They wouldn't be offending me or trying to offend me if they were in a nicer state of mind. So it's wild, to think that you can have compassion for somebody who's being offensive toward you. Right? But when you realize, but for
That
grace
feels
go
the
I.
best, right? That
What's
feels the
that?
best when that's like the best. That's like one of the best feelings ever. Honestly, it's like when you're just like, oh, when somebody's just trying to get under your skin, and you're like, oh, like, oh, I'll pray for you, even though, like figuratively maybe, but like it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I know you're feeling bad. That's why you're saying this. And it's
Yeah.
just,
And you
yeah, that
don't
was a
get
great thing.
offended. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. It feels, I don't know if what the word that comes to me is powerful, but that sounds like ego, so I don't want to give you that impression, but there's power in wisdom, wisdom power. Like Elsie uses the term wisdom energy. Wisdom is a power. That we neglect, that we don't pay that much attention to. So, thanks for joining me.
Thank
And
you.
so mark your calendar, because if this is a good time for all of you, I made this time 8:00 Monday nights, hoping to capture people who work really late on the East Coast. And if you can ever come on Wednesday at 2, that's when your people come on. And usually Monday, though, we also get 2 people from Oregon who are wonderful. They're both coaches. So then you get 3 of us to run stuff by. Alan Flood and Tom, can't think of Tom's last name right now. Maddox. Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
Because you weren't really thinking that hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. So have a good night the rest of tonight.
You
And
too.
look forward to seeing you all soon.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You have a great night. Thank you so
Good
much.
night.
Thank
Oh,
you.
you're very welcome. And don't forget, email me anytime if you have a question. Okay?
Okay.
We'll do.
Mhm.
Thank you.
We'll do.
Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Have a great night. Good
Bye,
night.
everybody.
Bye, everybody. Nice meeting you all.
Bye-bye. Nice to meet you too.